My name is Jamal Binding. I'm the chairman of the organization called MORE, Moving I'm All for Race Equity. And we're known for dealing with anti-racism, race equity issues, and been around for about 10 years. And our whole goal is to challenge systems, raise issues about disparities, and also to facilitate forums and community events where people can have a chance to talk about racial issues and deal with some of the apartheid conditions here in this community. With us today, we have a special guest, Alex Johnson. He's also a member of, he works at Bannister, a program that works on behalf of youth and families in the community. He's also a program team leader, excuse me, Douglas County. This involves leadership. He does facilitation, program fidelity, and he's also involved in community engagement. I've known Alex for a number of years. He also is a member of MORE. And again, he's known for doing a number of things, helping our families and people in the community. I know he attended Northwest High School, and he's also attended a number of community forums. So, Alec, welcome to Throwing Down Some Heavy Light. We're glad you're here with us today.
Awesome, Jamal. Thanks for having me. Good evening, everyone. Happy to be here.
Good. First, I want to start off, and I gave kind of a brief introduction. Tell the participants or viewers a little bit more about yourself and who you are, and send some other background information that I didn't share.
Yeah, sure, certainly. Thanks so much. So, I was born and raised in North Omaha. I lived there for 35 of my 40 years. I went to Mountain View, Springville, Nathan Hale, and Northwest. I did also attend Black Brennan Parish as well in my youth. And more or less, I approached the nonprofit and youth development community activism aspect from the lived experience angle. I did have some college, but that's not my background per se as far as working. I'm married with 4 children, 2 boys, 2 girls. I have 3 high schoolers and a toddler. And currently, I have returned gratefully to report back to Bannister's Leadership Academy, where I did also serve that mission in 2021 and 22 in a similar role of a program team lead, youth, family, and community partnership and engagement as well. So that's kind of a little bit about myself.
Good. About a year ago, there was another program in town. I'm not going to mention their name today, but at some point we'll talk more about that. They talked about their mentoring program. They work with youth people, families, and so on. And I asked them to define their successes or accomplishments. And to my chagrin, or to the persons who were supposed to get back to me, never followed through. They could not provide this basic, simple data. And again, I was asking more or less about racial data and not individual names, but just in general, how do you measure the success of your program? So I'm going to ask you a similar question. What are your numbers and how do you measure success from either your administrative point of view or from a community standard? So how's that done?
Certainly understood. So, from the administrative angle or aspect, we have a lot of research based data that goes into basically a system of assessments that we utilize throughout our program. So, just kind of quick background on Bannister, it's youth empowerment, youth leadership, mission, organization to strengthen youth and families through leadership. So, we have a specific dedicated curriculum that we instruct our mentees on. And there's 12, it's based around 12 pillars of leadership. And then there's also core values, et cetera, that kind of guide the mission as well. So, with that being said, the successes are measured with an instance of assessments. The program primarily is based around the school year, so first semester, second semester, and then we also have summer program as well. So there's 3 basically test points, if you will, assessment wise, and it's like a Survey Monkey. Basically, you fill out the questionnaire, and that data is compiled by a team that's down in Lincoln. And then we go over it at the summit, and that's at various summits throughout the year. That's how the successes and the progress are measured. And just a basic outline of it, per se, by definition, is um, some of the variables that we test on pre-test, post-test would be, for instance, self-efficacy. Do the mentees feel like they're able to do certain things based on their whatever the age or program that they're in? We have K through 12 programming, but there's K through 6th, and then we have 6th through 12th as well. So with that being said, it's based around, do they feel like they have a voice? Do they feel like they're safe in their community? Do they feel like they're safe in their family or their household? Questions such as that. So we do an assessment when they come into the program or when the tier of programming starts. and then we do another assessment at the end, and then basically we compare and contrast. Do the numbers go up or do the numbers go down? That's how we measure it from an administrative aspect. The community is a little bit more simple. It's basically what our observations are and what the mentees, the parents, the families, the schools, the businesses that we partner with, what have you, what their responses are, whether they're able to continue the partnership or their participation, and then obviously just overall what the general consensus or pulse, if you will, of what Bannisters is.
hmm You know, Alex, one of the things we've seen in our community, is particularly looking at the local media, has there been uptick in violence by youth in our community. Some will say it's been down. Again, if you listen to some of the reports, hard to figure out from some of the official folks. And as one of my colleagues used to say, that there are the few who are committing most of the repeated criminal or juvenile problems. So, in other words, if the increase is there, you can point to certain people who are constantly getting involved in those kind of negativities. What can we do to help those families and those individuals from your perspective?
I mean, as an individual, speaking as not only Bannisters or board member with more as well, but just as an individual, what does that take? What does that look like? It's a multifaceted endeavor, really. Honestly, obviously, it starts in the home with the parents and the families, but more so, it starts in the community because, of course, and this is not just Douglas County or Omaha. Of course, you can multiply this exponentially and apply it to any city, state, town, county, what have you, municipality, township, whatever the case may be. But you have to start in the community, and there has to be some transparency, and there has to be some intentionality when addressing those hot button issues. When we speak about youth violence in the community, or the upticks or the increases of the various areas, or sometimes individuals or groups that commit that violence, there's always going to be a underlying instance or situation that's going to apply to the where, when, why, and how. And a lot of times, whether we're looking at it from a funding or an intervention or a prevention or even a custodial aspect, I don't really feel the focus is put where it needs to be to really directly address those issues. I feel it starts in the home and it ultimately starts in the community, whether that's schooling, lack of affordable housing, jobs, things of that nature, community based, more or less, to be blunt, atrocities that kind of occur specifically in Douglas County with the disparities of based on race and geographical and socioeconomic disposition.
Wow. We when I worked at Douglas County Administration, many questions were raised about the need for collaboration with many agencies or organizations who serve family and youth in color in our community. Are there examples that you have that you've worked with other youth serving agencies or other families in terms of your programs and so on?
Jamal, it's very difficult question. I mean, to address it and to answer it specifically, yes. I mean, I have examples where we've partnered with U-Turn, we've partnered with Mays Metro Area Youth Services, um, and those are the two primary collaborators that I know for sure that we've done. I guess you could say open partnerships. We have a relationship as well with OPS and Bellevue Public Schools as well. We have a program actually in Sarpy County as well. But the thing about partnering per se with other like-minded agencies, organizations, as well, as what it really comes down to is um, it's there's too many heads to the same dragon, for lack of a better term. So what I mean by that definitively and specifically is you have a handful of groups, whether they're grassroots, grass tops, or representative only as far as a name and not necessarily doing the work in the community. But there's only so many youth at one given time, and there's only so much funding that's going around at one given time. So partnerships per se, and the interesting thing to note about Bannisters is we focus, we pride, and we set ourselves apart from other like-minded similar agencies in the community because our youth program facilitation takes place on weekends and evenings, right? So when the majority of nonprofit agencies, youth advocacy agencies, etc., and similar nonprofits, they're closed for the weekend, for the night. We're actually just activating for the week, for the weekend, as far as it goes with the programming. Like, what do we actually do? How do we actually put boots on the ground? So even though there's that marked difference where most of these other agencies and entities don't have a need or a requirement for the youth at that time. I'm just going to be honest, and I'm not going to out or specify anyone or say it's like that as a whole, but it's difficult to, shall I say, nurture or detect or develop a return on investment with those partnerships beyond um, being on a flyer together, because we're kind of all sharing
Mhm.
the same pot of stew, so to speak.
Right. You know, it reminds me of it we used to work in the area of food pantry or direct service. Sometimes people say, "How do you work with other agencies?" Well, they come to us, and we don't necessarily have a computer link because they're another separate nonprofit. And so, you know, some collaboration can have happen, but oftentimes, you know, we operate within our silos as an organization. One of the things that hit me, and some months ago we did an event. I'm thinking sometime around November, an international forum with refugees and migrants in our community, and we have a significant number of them who come into our community. We hear that all the time, all these languages we speak, yada, yada, yada. But at the end of the day, we got folks who are coming in who have some real serious issues. And I've heard that, again, from law enforcement and many agencies, we have to prepare and do a better job of working with those newcomers or people who come into our community. Do you serve any youth or people who are from other countries or who have migrated from other cities who may be from born on another continent or another country, so on and so on?
Most definitely. So currently, like right now, as we speak, we do have some families from some African families that are in the program. As far as the active roster, I know in my time previously, there were some South Asian, Southeast Asian families that attended the program as well. We don't have anything as far as like a translator interpreter by definition. It's typically an instance where the children have enough mastery of the English language to at least be the go between for communication, and the parents, however we can, whether it's text, email, or direct connect. To establish the communications with them. I know for myself personally, I can say, like with my time and work with Bannisters, there's been several families from Africa that I've worked with as far as trying to assist them with in one particular case, particular but not to get too specific, a young boy had been expelled, and I was kind of assisting the family with navigating that process. The young man spoke English, but he didn't understand the juvenile justice system, so I was very, I feel, instrumental or exhausted my ability to be of assistance there. So those instances, I guess, for I say all that to say it's probably piecemeal or situation specific, but myself as an individual representative for certain can assist, and are more than apt to with people from other nations, most definitely.
Mhm. You know, I'm astonished as I deal with many of the families and youth in the community in different meetings and formats. Many of them don't understand the factors that can cause a kid or a young person to enter into the juvenile or the criminal justice system. What can we do to encourage proper parenting skills, youth engagement, understanding the laws or the ordinance that can help us reduce that school to prison pipeline, which is a part of the paradigm of this local community. So, how do we help people avoid that system?
Jamal, everybody in that, the response to that is everybody has to do what they can when they can. If everybody does a little, it's going to pay out huge dividends on an exponential level. Some people are better at some things, more comfortable at other things, and more adept at other things than other people. Some people are able to serve the community in different facets and aspects, right? So people really have to, we as a community here, in Omaha, we really have to not let our differences divide, but let our differences unite us and build on those strengths and that diversity, because that's ultimately where an infrastructure of sorts, that's been sorely lacking and absent in the North Omaha community specifically. That's where those grassroots and those foundations are built, because different people from different walks of life, even within North Omaha, are going to have a somewhat potential to have a different story to tell and a different skill set, if you will, to bring to that, to that situation. So, I mean, really, it's people being involved and being impactful and really exercising efforts, not going through the motions, making efforts to break generational curses, not accepting the norm or the status quo, even if that means to some extent and to some degree being nonconformist. And I don't encourage anything, of course, that's outside of the law, but protesting or writing papers or writing I can't think of the judicial term, but it's
Advocacy letters or writing social justice
correct. You
petitions, you
write a
name
letter that you disagree with
it.
something
Right.
that's being passed or a policy that's being imparted. There's nothing wrong with that, and that's your civic duty, and it's definitely absolutely your right. So again, I say all that to say we have to try to look at things as a we and not just my household or my side of town or my zip code or my funding stream, whatever the case may be. We have to look at it as a us thing because ultimately and invariably we're all going to be touched, by the same shadows at
Thank
some
you.
point.
It's interesting. The Amal Police Department a few years ago hired the first Sudanese officer. You think they would have been a little bit more aggressive, but it was good they finally did that. And I think they are reaching out to some of the other ethnics and racial groups who come from other parts of the world. So again, we know if you have people on your staff from those respective groups, you get a much more better quality indicators of them doing the kind of work because they know how to work with the respective communities. Oftentimes one of the metaphors that I use when I talk and I ask guest questions, I use the magic wand. And again, the question I want to ask you, Alex, is, knowing your program, knowing some of the issues and so on in our community, what are some things we need to change if we want to make our community better from your vantage point? If you had that magic wand, what would that be for you?
Well, for myself, I would definitely like to see more light cast and shed on the indigenous Native American community. I mean, a couple of years ago, we saw the uh, egregious, disgusting implementation of the other category, and that was just the most recent of a conglomerate, if you will, almost a nonstop, incessant uh, pooling of opportunities for indigenous native people to be included, recognized, etc. And that just does not happen. If we look at kind of the historical uh, aspect of America, the native people were the enemy. When you look at how the African people were kidnapped and brought over here, they were treated just like any other enemy, right? But that's not what they were brought here for. That wasn't their purpose. The native had no purpose. They didn't exist. They were just in the way. So I really would not I would like to see that continue to get some light and some attention shown on it and some serious, really just recognition, honestly, and some accountability. I'd also like to see the same thing, obviously, for the African Americans, the Black people in the community and ultimately in the country, because so much of the history is disconnected and buried. They say the African in America is someone without a history, without a past, without a memory. You can't necessarily go back and say, I'm from this tribe, from this clan, my people did this, that, or the third. And I think that contributes to a lot of the disconnect, the absence of community, the absence of unity in the community because we don't have that historic baseline or per se. And then I guess if I had a magic wand, what I would just really like is some of the powers that be in the civic realm, as far as the police, the school board. I just wish that we could have much more. Two of my favorite terms is the transparency and intentionality. And what I mean by that is we all recognize certain things. We all recognize certain aspects of society. And the people that are in power or empowered or entrusted to make those changes, they don't. And it becomes a system and it becomes systemic and systematic where everybody can see it. It's like the elephant in the room, or the bull in the china case. Everybody can see it, but it's like nobody really does anything about it. And that's just one man's wish. And that ties back again to what I said moments ago, that everyone has to do their part. So ultimately, my final wish would just be that everyone that is affected by these issues and these plights in our community would do what they could when they could.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Many of the things that we're talking about more and elsewhere, and I've heard other people talk about this in other communities of color, that we need to have kind of a community of color conference or dialogue to work on unifying our systems and some of our institutions and so on, and how we can get together. And most people may not be aware that almost a third people of color, but you would never know that looking at these lily white institutions and organizations and even the boards of directors. So my question is, would you be open to participating in such an event if we had some kind of a major event that hopefully will bring us to the table to help solve some of our issues?
Yeah, not only would I be interested in participating, and inviting on behalf of Bannisters, but as a board member, I'd be uh delighted to assist with some sort of facilitation in the organization, and at the bare minimum getting the word out. I think that that's just very paramount and very central to really making some strides. We didn't really mention or touch on any of the this massive funding that's going to hit and is starting to hit North and South Omaha as far as all these grants and these businesses and things of that nature. But this could potentially be a historic monumental opportunity, and I think some sort of conference that you reference in conjunction with that could just obviously further the cause, as well as cement the focus as well, solidify it. So more than apt to join and be
Mhm.
delighted to.
It's interesting you use this point of unity and so on. The guy who wrote the book Black Power with Sterling Carmichael, Kwame Ture, he just recently passed, and there was a powerful obituary about him in the New York Times, and there was some other obituaries elsewhere, and I had a chance to read it, the book, and read the obituaries. The book is like in 1960s, but one of the keys concept that Charles Hamilton, Dr. Hamilton, talked about is that he was teaching at Tuskegee, the black college where Carter, not Carter Jewison, but Booker T. Washington was at, and he got fired for trying to get the students involved themselves in the civil rights movement, as well as writing letters to elected officials. Now it's almost ironic. Here you have an African American get fired from a black college for helping black folks to fight for civil rights and so on. But one of the legacies he wrote about and talked about is that in order for a group to go forward, they must close ranks and they must get themselves together. And so too often we don't have that. And so if we look at Charles Hamilton, Kwame Ture, Stokely Carmichael, their book, you'll see that that is a central theme that he says, you're not going to hold other people accountable until you first hold yourself accountable. So again, that's why it's very important for us to bring ourselves together. By the way, Alex, if somebody wanted to contact you or talk to you or catch more about your program and, on any different levels, how would they do that? Where's your contact information and how would they find you?
Yeah, certainly. Thank you. So the website for the mission with Bannisters is www.bannisters with an S at the end, Banisters, bannisters.org. My personal email for the mission is A for Alpha, J for Juliet, AJ at bannisters.org. And then my mission mobile phone number for anyone that would be interested in that Express Direct Connect is 402 979 1050.
By the way, when I introduced your program, I said Bannister, but I noticed you also said Bannister Leadership Academy. Is that the formal name of the organization, or is that something you add in terms of programmatic name or what?
Correct. Yes, officially it is Bannister's Leadership Academy. I mean, within more or less the youth engagement nonprofit community, more or less, is just referred to as Bannisters. But that's the website, bannisters.org. But the official title is Bannister's Leadership Academy, because we really do believe with the work that we do and the unique things that do set us apart from other similar, again, like-minded agencies, is that we really do want to contribute to making the future community change makers, and we do believe in that.
Mhm. One thing that hit me as you were talking is that you alluded to Native Americans, and I know that Donna Pope, who runs the Indian Health Center here in the community, is always saying Native Americans are the forgotten minority. And oftentimes we talk about Black and Brown, we don't include Native Americans and sometimes Asians. So one of the things we be central to is when people don't understand the concept of people of color, they're talking about those four groups, and obviously the indigenous people who was here and then we found them. And however we arrived here, we have to always give homage to that. But it's also somewhat condescending when you hear these folks jump around. Let's give homage to the land and da da da, and won't bust a grape or have a person of color or Native American on their staff. So again, we can say all the platitudes and all the whatever. If we're not dealing with that from a structural point of view and have evidence that we are welcoming and working with people and communities of color, and particularly Native Americans, and we're just paying lip service and blowing in the wind. Before we open it up to the participants today for them to provide comments or feedback or whatever, do you have anything else you want to say to our audience or to us before we open it up to people who are on this event?
Yeah, just real briefly, of course, I definitely want to thank you for having me and giving me an opportunity and a platform, to speak on behalf of Bannisters and share a little bit of my personal innuendos as well. So definitely appreciate that. I did not want to let the time go by for too much time without recognizing this specific day. I was very grateful to be able to represent Bannisters as well as more on today. So for those that don't know, today, February 21st, it is the 59th anniversary of the martyr for the brother minister, El Haj Malik El Shabazz, more formerly known as Malcolm X, born here in Omaha on 34th and Pinckney Street on May 19th, 1925. So I definitely wanted to just definitely give a shout out to the brother minister and just rest in heaven eternity, and just very grateful to be able to be an Omaha resident. That's kind of like when the movie came out in 92. That's what sparked really everything that I try to do today. I wasn't always this way, but I've gotten back to those roots. I'm very happy to be able to reprise that role. And really just the only other thing that I wanted to say again is just everybody, whatever opportunities that you have to be that change and to make that difference. Like you were speaking on Jamal on different people's hiring practices and staff. If someone is a HR director, give somebody that opportunity. Don't be afraid to speak up and speak out. I understand sometimes people get fearful about a job and things of that nature, but if you're a professional, and one thing I've always learned to do is bet on myself. If you believe in yourself and you're confident in yourself, as one door closes, another one opens, right? So just never hesitate, because Ajamal, I've seen you do a lot of throwing down the heavy light, right? Shaking up a lot and ruffling a lot of feathers. And I like that. And I appreciate that. And I really wish that more of the youth would take a stand and be like that. I'm 40 years old. So unfortunately I'm kind of creeping out of the youth sector, but there's another generation coming up. So, um, yeah, just everybody stay in your focus, stay in your drive. Don't be afraid to connect and network, ask questions, write your congressman, your senator, your city councilman, go to board meetings. I mean, I've been getting into that myself a lot. And the things that you hear and the people that you see and the things that you find out, you will be surprised. And it's happening right out in the open, and we can't change it if we don't act on it. So,
Well,
um,
Alex, I appreciate that. And as you alluded to Malcolm X, I always like to remind folks that we have a Black Studies department at UNO. We don't even have a Malcolm X required course or have people who teaching courses on that level. And again, Malcolm being from Omaha, you would think it'd be sacrosanct. We would have his books in every library and every place where people are studying him and discussing his teaching. Because again, as we all know, he started from a little of nowhere and became one of the greatest international figures across the globe. And so we really got to give homage to Brother Malcolm. Again, he's died at a tender age of 39, but boy, was fascinating. So was Martin Luther King, also died at the same age, and they left a lot for us to learn and reach back and understand the breadcrumbs they left for those generations to do that. So at this point, we like to open it up, and we normally do this to who's a participant. Any comments, Alex, or comments you'd like to make related germane to this conversation? And don't all be shy, as we say. I notice we don't see a lot of cameras up here. I've opened what do you call those things where they have their cameras on? But yeah, Sister Cynthia, I see you turned yours on. That means you got something to say. Your mic's not on. I can't hear you. Your mic's not on. Your microphone, I can't hear. Okay, there you go. You're on now.
I'm always appreciative of any recognition of Malcolm X. That's one of those characters that I appreciate more and more because of Ajmal having us read the Malcolm X Reader. It was a very good discussion to get. Yeah, I see you nodding, Alex. Great. I just had I have two comments. One is regarding partnership with schools. You mentioned OPS, and the second has to do with your comment about Native Americans. So I'll just say what I wrote here. That you mentioned OPS when speaking of partnership.
Kind of buffering, sisters. Kind of buffering. We gotta have to repeat that. Freezing up on us, or maybe we might have to type it in.
yeah, maybe put it in the chat.
Yeah, it's frozen. Well, let's see if we can come somebody else then, because it's frozen. Hers is frozen. So if we any other comments? I'm not sure what she was going to ask or say, but I know there's something about the school system and in your interaction. But again, she didn't get a chance to finish it. Call that bandwidth, folks. Sometimes it doesn't work well. And one of the things I always encourage folks, it sounds kind of a self-serving plug, but if you got a way to hook your computer system up directly to your modem, it cuts a lot of that out. Or if you got, so I had a colleague of mine tell me that sometimes he had to turn off some of his Wi-Fi stuff.
Okay.
Okay,
I
you
went
did.
to unstable. You got my
Yeah.
first question?
No, we didn't get it. It didn't come through, sister. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
No
Okay,
worries.
two things. Let's see. You mentioned OPS when speaking of partnerships. And my question is, do you interface or collaborate in any way with Jesuit Academy or with Nelson Mandela School? And my second is referring to your comment, which I really appreciated. The native people were the enemy African, were brought here and they had a purpose for work. Native had no purpose. They were just in the way. And I'm following the Palestinian situation very closely, and it's like Palestinians are just in the way. So that really echoed when you used that phrase. And my question or just comment is I watch a lot of PBS NET5, the First Nation Experience channel. And I just really applaud the native peoples speaking more and more, claiming their voice. And it gives me hope for people like the Palestinians. So that's my two
Yes.
comments.
Thank you so much for that, Cynthia. You're always on all these events, so it's good to see you here again for this one with my face on it. So I really appreciate you being here as well and your insight. If I may just respond to it, Ajamal, and I'll pass it over to you. The Jesuit Academy, not that I'm aware of, as far as any partnerships or collaborations, I don't really know what has or has not gone into that or what efforts have been made. Mandela, we actually just had a meeting this week with them to move forward with some partnerships and collaboration to do some programming within that lovely facility. And also our current program site was the result of a previous meeting with Mandela where at that particular moment they were not they just didn't have the opportunity or the ability to collaborate with us, but they referred us to a church actually, which became our program site. So definitely looking forward to pushing forward with Mandela as far as that programming there. And as far as the comparative analogy between what's currently happening in the Middle East and what happened here in Native America is um, something that's always been very interesting to me in recent history. If you look at what what is happening in the Middle East. You look at and again, this is just one man's opinion. This isn't necessarily the views expressed are not necessarily representative of so on and so forth, right? Just Alex here. If you look at what's happening over there and kind of what's been happening, um, and how the West views it, how America views it, you hear terms like religious fanaticism, zealots, things of that nature, right? Even this whole war on terror was kind of sort of formulated behind 9/11, which had religious implications, so on and so forth. If anyone remembers their history books of the process and the concept of how the West was won, and anymore, you don't see it or hear it referred to as much. But when I was coming up in the 90s and was going to school, there was something that they called manifest destiny. And that was a generally accepted term in America for the the colonists, that God told them to take over America. They were brought here to take America and everything in it. And the people that were already here, they just, like I said, they just kind of had to get out of the way and go away. So if you really just kind of take those comparative contrasts and analogies, what's different about it besides the West is looking at what's happening in the Middle East as religious fanaticism and terrorism. But when it was executed in the colonial conquest of America, do you not think that Native Americans didn't feel that these people are being religiously fanatic by saying that by not converting to Christianity, they're beasts and heathens and savages, and they have entire civilizations that were existing here in the centuries, so on and so forth? Do you not think they didn't think that was religious fanaticism? So I've always found that interesting about, especially since 9/11, how America, the West views what's happening over there and their plight. And somehow it just cannot draw that very basic connection to what happened in America from the Europeans to the natives.
As you mentioned that, one thing I just want to say, I think is going back to the earlier question about Mandela and the Jesuit school. They've been around for a number of years, particularly the Jesuit school. And even when I was working at Catholic Church for 25 years, I never got invited there. I don't know anybody of any substance who get to these places from a community grassroots perspective. So if you're working with some of the future leaders of our community and you're in charge of these institutions, I would hope you'd be much better than the public schools where you'd bring the elders or people in the community and parents and engage them. And one of the things that I remember years back that we did where we had an open house, and from time to time there was no hindrance or there was no sense of stipulation. We just had an open house where we invited the community to come and celebrate our existence at the organization. So I would hope these organizations from time to time would do community forums, have open houses, and let other people see the good work that they're doing. And if they're doing good work, they should be bragging about it in a sense, not bodacious, but at least talking about all the good work they're doing to help our children. So I would hope both of those would do that. And then as to the Palestinian issue, I think that's a fascinating issue. And I became much more than a bystander. And again, I studied Jewish culture and history during the Holocaust and saw there are victims, perpetrators. Reading Raul Hindenburg's book, bystanders, victims, and perpetrators. And basically, what he said is some people just sat back and some Jewish people participated in their own oppression. Well, one of the things I'm fascinated by is what South Africa, one of the countries at least can afford to take Israel to court on genocide. And so, whether we agree or disagree, the fact that they stood up, what happened to all the Arab countries? And so, this is something we got to pay attention to because those of us who are historians know that when you start to kill and murder innocent people, that is not an act of war. It becomes a case of genocide. And so, again, the eye is very important. As they say, if you eye for an eye, you can make people blind. But I think we're beyond that at this point. So we need to look at what's happening, and more of us need to get involved and challenge um, that craziness, and at least talk about it. Because again, if we can't even have the conversation, what kind of country do we live in? Other questions, other feedback. Let me stop because I can be more than talk more than I guess, and I guess is here and participants. Other feedback, other reactions. And I know some people, if you don't want to say something, you can even put it in the chat and we can read it out because some people are anonymous or incognito. And sometimes I'm surprised at the folks who, they have a lot to say or whatever, but it's like they are afraid to say basic stuff you should say, even a simple question. So feel free.
And in this pause while the others are thinking, I'd like to ask Alex, I would be remiss not to mention the CUES school system, which includes Sacred Heart, All Saints, and Holy Name. All three of those really should hear from you. And
We
I'm
did
hoping
actually,
you would reach out to them.
But just what is the Q system? People who don't know what that is, or who are not in your system,
Yeah,
what does that mean?
They've
when you say
changed
the
what
Q?
the initials mean, but it's the inner city, it's the Catholic effort to sustain and maintain and build up the inner city schools. So
And is
that's
it
one
elementary? Is it elementary or high school or all of the above?
element. Well, I'm familiar with elementary because I'm a substitute teacher. So I've
Elementary schools.
substituted at All Saints, which is on 10th, is by the railroad down there. And there's a large number of Sudanese there. Then there's
Okay.
also the Holy Family, which not Holy Family, the one on Fontenelle down there.
Holy Name.
Holy Name. Yes, and there's many Latinas there. I've not substituted in that there, but Sacred Heart, of course, is very multi-religious, multicultural. These are not just Catholic schools. There's all kinds of children there. So that's why I was thinking of Alex and what he does and the leadership formation.
Yeah,
There's
we
also
did actually do program summer 21. We started our program at Holy Name. We did start it there. Had a great relationship with the principal. They were doing some remodeling. And I wasn't really privy to the details as far as what went into the decisions per se. I honestly kind of just think it was due to the remodel because like I mean, I was there at the site. Like we didn't really have a whole lot of climate control. It was in the summer. It was just really hot, right? So the part of the building that had been allocated to us was not there was no climate control. It was the remodeled like space. So you had the administrative offices where the principal and the summer school staff and the classrooms were, those were air conditioning and almost literally kind of zoned off. That part was kind of sustained climate wise. And they were like, yeah, you guys can use this over here, but we're kind of working on it. So honestly, it's one of those things, Cynthia, where as I kind of alluded to earlier, is the pot is so small and there's so many hands in it because it's there's so many things about Bannisters that are very unique, and even for someone like myself who does not have a traditional background in nonprofit or what have you, there's a lot of things that are very unique and that go into supporting and bringing his vision to life. But he's real big, and I believe in it myself very specifically in community collaboration. We very much rely and seek to sustain and elevate and grow the mission of Bannisters through community collaborations, partnerships, and it's foundational is Douglas County, but I mean Bannisters is actually statewide. Like we have program in Scottsbluff, North Platte, Hastings, or like we're in a lot of different communities across the state that obviously serve different populations and cultures and ethnicities as well. So a lot goes into that, and we're very open mindset type people when it comes to those meetings, those sit downs, and what those structures could potentially look like. That's honestly it's a good chunk of what I do is trying to again develop and nurture and cultivate those relationships with not just schools, but like I have relation previously when I was with the mission previously, the Malcolm X Center, the Rose Theater, where they would facilitate workshops at our program. We'd have people from the Rose come in and do art type things with the mentees. So that strengthens everything, right? That strengthens the network, that exposes at risk and affected populations, that exposes them to the arts. Hey, the Rose Theater, I didn't even know what that was down there, that type of deal. So I agree with you, and I definitely work fervently to always try to see and do more in that area.
Other feedback, other comments?
You know, Ajamal, just real quickly, again, I was just waiting and I was just thinking just a quick something while you were summarizing the Middle East and people's need to at least be aware and have conversations. To be complacent is to be compliant, right?
Mm-hmm. There you go.
Simply put.
Somebody turned on their camera. You got something to say here? Go ahead. Is your microphone on? I don't see a microphone there.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you good. Go ahead.
Okay, great. I wanted to say something, Alex. I'm trying to tie this back to the work that I did with the Malcolm X Foundation, and that was with the suspensions with students. And one thing that Leo kind of got upset about, I think there was an article in the Reader, and they were saying that the suspension disproportionality, they said that it was Hispanic students as well as African American students. And that's not what the data has shown. And that's not what he had expressed in the article. It's just that people assume that because across the country, that's kind of where the focus is. But what we found out was it was Native American students and African American students that were being disproportionately suspended in OPS. And I think that goes to what you talked about, and I think this is why there needs to be more community involvement. Because like you said, other groups that came here, even as we're talking about other groups of immigrants, because a lot of times people will say, oh, we're a nation of immigrants. And I'm like, wait a minute, not all of us or not all people of color were immigrants. What are you saying? And so I think sometimes what comes up with the disciplinary issues is that our African American children and our Native American children, they have a different perspective on white people and them telling them how to behave and what they should do, because they're hearing their parents and they're at home, they're hearing people saying, wait a minute, you can't always trust that they have your
best interests at heart.
Exactly. So I think a lot of times our children have a little bit of an attitude, and they're not like grateful that I got to come to America and we're glad that we're here. This is such a wonderful country. They have a different history and different things that they've heard. And I think that comes out with a little bit of their more defiant behavior, as they would describe it. And then that gets so I think it also needs to be something that's discussed. Describe it. And then that gets so I think it also needs to be something that's discussed. Describe it. And then that gets so I think
you're reverberating, it sounds like.
And then that gets so I think
you're reverberating. Okay.
I didn't know who that was. That wasn't me talking. I don't think.
It was. It just kept rolling.
Oh, okay. That sounds like my mouth. Yeah, so that makes sense.
No, it might be feedback from the Facebook. That was Facebook Live doing that, I think, maybe.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I really appreciate that. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say, I think that parents need to understand that. And then there needs to be a way that the community conveys that to the school districts and stuff when it comes to behavior and our kids and how they relate to oftentimes with a school staff that is basically majority white, doesn't look like them, that they have a different history that they bring to the table when people are trying to discipline them and tell them your behavior is this or that. They're kind of like thinking in the back of the head, your behavior wasn't too good either. So yeah, so that's all I wanted to comment on, because I liked when you brought up that about Native Americans and everything, and that part about how it's different there. So
Very much so.
Uh-huh.
And I'm glad you brought that up. I want to quickly share just a couple of things, and I definitely Cynthia, I know you'll be there, but I want to invite you back because Ajamal and I are we're cooking up something. It's in the works and it's in the process, so we can't really say too much right now. But there's going to be some more OPS stuff coming down the pipeline, and that's more based. That's totally more based, right? That's me as an individual, and at the end of the day, I went to OPS, I graduated, so on and so forth. So that's one man's mission in conjunction with more. But two things I quickly want to share in relation that speak directly to your comments and kind of why I base a lot of my um, thoughts and processes around that. My oldest son, he's a junior in high school. When he was in the 5th or 6th grade, he went to an elementary school in OPS. I guess I should try to have a little tact and guile here and not just give names and specifics here. All things considered. So he comes home from school one day and he tells me that I need to get a hold of someone at the school. They need to speak to me. And I say, what's wrong? And if you couldn't detect or haven't already discovered or done the simple math, I'm Black and Native American. That's my lineage and my heritage. So they asked my son, a security guard who was an older Black gentleman. He pulled my son aside. This is just an elementary school security guard. He pulled my son aside and asked him, was the reason that he was not pledging allegiance to the flag was because he was a Muslim. So that was 5, 6 years ago. Just 2 years ago, I was at an alternative high school on behalf of Bannisters doing an assembly to recruit mentees from those at-risk situations because we take all comers, but we honestly specialize on that sect of the population. When I was here with Bannisters in 21 and 22, we had a specific program set up directly with juvenile probation where we were receiving referrals, we were doing aftercare, we were getting them set up with different aftercare services, helping out with schools, things of that nature. So one day I was at an assembly there for 8th grade students, 8th grade social studies class, in between passing period, I think possibly even a lunch hour. I just happened to randomly pick up a worksheet, 8th grade social studies worksheet. And this is totally random, totally organic. This is a true story, just as sure as I'm sitting here. I go to read it. The worksheet says, and I quote verbatim, millions of people from Africa volunteered to come to America because they wanted to help and participate in building the greatest nation in the world. And I promise everyone that can hear that's in the power of my voice, that was an 8th grade social studies worksheet in 2021 or 22 in Omaha Public Schools.
Well, it's almost embarrassing to even cite that they do that all the time. But when my kids were in school, two things. One, we were working on multicultural education, and they were going to use Native American music as one of the culture issues, and they picked Cherokee People by Paul Revere and the Raiders. And we were like, you got to be kidding. We were shocked that these administrators were that inept and that incompetent. The second thing, and this is somewhat sad about this, where I'm not going to mention the African American who was a long-term principal over at Walnut Hill. I went in my kid's room one day and they had all those alphabets against the wall at the top, and they had I for Indians. And I wrote a letter and says, no, you can't do that. You wouldn't put other racial groups like that, so don't do that. And I think they subsequently were smart enough and had the cognitive process and cranial capacity to remove that I or move that whole thing there. But again, some of the stuff that people can tell you what they went through in our school settings because they don't listen to parents or they're not respectful of our culture. And again, Senator Chambers talked about as a kid, he had to read books or had books about little black Sambo. So we got to be much more sensitive and get many of these folks to understand that if you're working with a school district that is predominantly students of color, 80–90%, you can't come in there with that old school brainwashing, colonialist mentality that they do. And again, it does not reflect white supremacy. So other feedback, other reactions. Indian, eye for Indian. I'm like, no, why got you put that on my kid's wall and got to go to school here? But yeah, other feedback. We got about 8 minutes left or 7 minutes left. Any other comments from somebody else who have not said anything? Alex, how do you balance between doing your stuff as a parent, a community agency person, and someone who works for an organization? Because sometimes I had to switch hats literally, and it was difficult. And sometimes people would come at me or go say something to my boss or supervisor when I did stuff clearly, and I was working on a parent level after working hours. And how does that work for you? I know back in the day it was difficult to navigate for me because people always wanted to say I worked for this organization, only worked there for 8 hours a day and not the other 16 hours. I had 8 hours. I had to count sometimes 16 to my wife and family. So I definitely couldn't be working for the institution. But how do you balance it yourself?
I agree, Ajamal. You know, it's a mindset kind of thing, and I definitely subscribe to that mindset of I mean, Bannisters promotes it as a mission, and there's a lot of things that go into team building and everything with that specifically as being a member of that organization. So I can speak to that in a positive note. But as far as the balancing, it does take a lot of tact and guile. I was at the 360 meeting at the Omaha Home for Boys this afternoon. You know, it's 30% OPD, 30% OPS, and then the rest is community, nonprofit, concerned citizens, etc. So, you know, you're talking about these issues in the community and the disparities of suspensions, police shootings, arrests, traffic stops. That's all on that one side of the room. So it's very difficult. And I always identify myself as Bannister's more board member at those meetings. So I am wearing both of those hats. So honestly, at the end of the day, the balance for me is struck because it's pretty much as simple as you said. I'm still a person, and before I can be anything, including a father, I had to be a man before I could be any of those things.
Mhm.
So my ways and means and methods and my moral code and compass, that's unique to me myself, not representative or indicative of anything else above or beyond that. That's just Alex Johnson Sr.
Appreciate
So yeah, you just have to you really have to stick to your guns, and yes, I am representing and representative of Bannister's youth leadership. But if ever there was some sort of bone of contention or some sort of misgiving that my personal opinions or activism outside of that could affect that, then I mean, I'm smart enough to know they're going to be talking to somebody with a PC after their name, or Esquire, perhaps, right? Then you're getting into the legalities of it. So people need to understand, because just being transparent, like obviously as I alluded to Ms. Crawford Gray, like, you know, I got something kind of cooking up with OPS. You have to be intentional, transparent, like I said, but you also have to let these old world gatekeeping type systems and implementations know something that I tell these people every time, whatever it is, doesn't necessarily have to be OPS, just the property company, anything, anywhere, right? I always have to tell people, I need you to understand, English is not my second language. I went to college, so on and so forth. And what I mean by that is certain instances, certain applications of people, they get used to, or they get whitewashed or rinse washed, repeated, and cycled to the same type of people, and they get this indifference. So you can't read me something from an FAQ page that I read for 15 minutes before I called you. Like, so what does that mean? Like, what am I saying? You have to apply that same logic to your like activism and your ways and means. You know what I mean, Ajamal? So I have to use that same type of tact and guile and gambit even to sometimes code switch, as they say, right? So you have to be able to be many things to many people to accomplish your goals. Now, does that mean I sacrifice any type of moral stance or status? No, not at all. Quite the opposite. You just have to find a way to present the information so it's minimally offensive, maximum effective.
Thank you. You know, it reminds me of a point back in the day we used to say to the kids, and always say it to me also, remember the name. Don't go out there and embarrass our family and do something. But one of the things I learned work for the institutions, you have to sometime when you're in public and they see you as working for that organization, say, I'm speaking as an individual today And again, many times I got caught up in that where people want to attribute something I said is from a family or community perspective to an organization because they didn't want you to speak truth to power. But these are very important things we got to do, folks, because our community is in bad shape and it's becoming worse, where some of the very people who should be in front are on the sidelines and so on. We have about a couple of minutes left, and anything before we close down, anything from anybody else? We have about 2 minutes left or 3 minutes left.
I guess I would just like to thank Alex for being here. Good to meet you this way. I jotted down another one of your wonderful statements. It says, I think you said do code switching.
Mhm.
Code switching. Yes, that's a.
And I thought, do you have a course on that?
It's by genetics only, Cynthia. I must report. So
And
I mean,
when I lived in southern Missouri, I had to do the code switching because Catholics were so much in the minority.
well, there
I
you
had to
go.
put
That's
my
what-
Bible
yeah,
hat, my Bible hat on and my Catholic hat away or something.
That's exactly right. That's what's required, right? And the thing about it is, I think that speaks to understanding. I think as people of color or a minority group, a Catholic in Southern Missouri, I think that speaks to people's comprehension and their understanding of diversity. And you more often see that from minority groups than the majority. You see that ability, and it's just like a wink and a nod. And it's not anything that's being dishonest. It's sometimes, hey, I need this person to understand where I'm coming from and get past this. I need them to see. There's an old Native American proverb, one of my favorites, and examine the message, not the speaker, right? So listen to what is said, not who says it. So don't get hung up on what I look like, or maybe if I have an accent, or maybe even some of the younger generation that uses a little bit more slang than we'd be comfortable with in a professional setting. Don't let that dissuade the fact that they could be speaking their truth to power and they could have something we all need to hear.
Yes.
I just
Great
realized
point.
I did code switching when I was starting to use the word apartheid to talk about Palestine. And then I listened to Ta-Nehisi Coates, and he's talking about Jim Crow, and I'm going, okay, so I switched from using apartheid, and I just would say Jim Crow, and it's like the people I'm talking to knew what I meant. So I don't know.
That's great work. You don't need a course from me. You can probably teach it. You're
Thank
hitting
you.
you're striking while the iron's hot.
Wait, folks, y'all not supposed to make the host laugh like this. Hold on, especially laugh out loud. Folks, we're down to our last minute or so. We try to stay within our framework. We did start a little bit late, but two things I want to mention is we're going to have two events coming up. I think next week, Tuesday around lunchtime, we're going to have two people from Namibia talk about poaching. In Botswana, they've shot some of the Namibian people who are fishermen, are out there in the river or elsewhere, and it's a controversial issue internationally where the former president, Ian Khama, said basically that, even if you're innocent, I still get to shoot you. And he's kind of like a conservationist. He's not like in Botswana anymore. He's a refugee in South Africa because he did so many crazy things. And so he feels he's under pressure that he might be hurt if he comes back. But again, it's the first time you've had a president, ex-president, leave the country, live in another country. But again, the issue, the question we're going to talk about is conservationists. Do we have a right to kill people over an animal? And again, it's people who are into PETA, some of them feel that animals have just as much right as humans. And I would love to have that discussion with these two individuals from Namibia, which is next to South Africa and Botswana. They also share a border, I think, with Zambia. And so it's a whole big issue of, do we take animal life over human life? And again, that economy some people disagree with. So we're going to have them at 12 noon our time talk about that. And then the other event we got planned, we have a Botswana author who wrote a book about stories related. And it's a book we're going to put on our webpage, but deals with the whole issue of some of the stories that grew up in her country. Just like Alexander McCall wrote about the Lady Detective series. She has a book about what happened in her country. So we're excited to have somebody from that part of the world as part of our SLALA program to bring us to an international level to talk about race issues related to conservationists as they deal with Black folks and whites and so on. And so we're hoping people will join us on those two important events. And again, you have to go to our website to see these events and sign up for that. But on that note, I'd like to thank our guests who Alex Johnson, who was here, and also a board member, and Alex, a member of the Bannister Leadership Academy, and of course the folks who participated. And we hope you join us again next time for another edition of Throwing Out Some Heavy Light. Barocco.